Hello, my name is Stuart Goche, County Agent with the LSU Ag Center, and welcome to Get It Growing with the Lafayette Master Gardeners. Today we have two very special guests with us that are going to be talking a lot about houseplants. But before we get to that, I'd like to just talk a little bit about our new time slot. This is actually the second show that we're doing at 12 noon, and throughout the year you can join us the first week of each month, the first Thursday of each month at 12 noon. We'll be here to answer your questions about gardening, and hopefully we can also provide a little bit of information about how to make you a better gardener in Acadiana. In case you're not able to catch all of this show, it's going to be replayed on July 4th at 12 a.m. and 1 p.m. and July 5th at 5 a.m. But it will be live at 12 noon the first Thursday of each month. Be sure to check out our website. Our website is www.LafayetteMasterGardeners.org. It'll have a lot of the information that we will be covering today. And it also has a lot of information about the Lafayette Master Gardener program in general. Also, you can feel free to call our office in case you have a question throughout the month on gardening. We usually have some Master Gardeners on staff there that'll be there to answer your questions. Our number at the office is 291-7090. I'd like now to get to our guest. We have with us Ms. Janae Foley, who's one of our Lafayette Master Gardeners. She's been real involved with our plant swap that we do, and she also is kind of one of our big plant experts that I know I go to a lot when I have a question about houseplants or plants in general. And we also have Susan Ludwig, who's the owner of Rain Tree Nursery, is also a special guest that we have with us today. Welcome, and thank you all for coming today.
Thank you, Stuart. I would like to first start out when you're about doing interior horticulture or selecting plants for interior horticulture. You want to identify the location that you're actually trying to put a plant in or landscape in interior, doing the interior landscaping. And how you actually do that is you look at your location and you try and determine what that space is going to dictate. And after you determine what type of plant that you actually want, you want to go ahead and see what's out on the market. And you do that by visiting your local garden centers or any type of nursery environment to see what type of plants are out there for you to select. And once you get to that point, you have to determine what lighting you're going to actually have in your house is going to dictate what plant you're going to select on the open market. And determining that what that actually does is gives you the ability to see if that plant is grown in a certain amount of light. If you bring that plant into an environment where it doesn't have a lot of light, then you're going to have some problems. So that's very important when you're selecting plants. Also, to keep in mind when you're selecting plants is what type of family environment you have. If you have small kids, that becomes very important because you have certain plants that are poisonous if you ingest them. So that's something to keep in mind when you're selecting your plants. Also the growing conditions. Right, Janine?
That's right. You know, we understand that it sounds so confusing at times that you have to consider all of, I mean, a lot of times you're a beginner, just focusing on one plant is hard enough, and we're telling you have to be conscious of the light, you have to be conscious of the water, you have to think about your family pets, you have to think about the family dogs. But the important thing is, like the title of our program, just get it growing. You're going to make mistakes. I can guarantee you that. We all have. I shudder sometimes to think the number of plants that I kill. But you're going to learn and you're going to have fun growing plants, whatever you start with.
Yes, I agree with you on that.
Right. And although most of us don't need any excuse to go buy a plant, plants do more for us actually in the home than beautify a room. Foliage plants can help remove air pollutants that leach from new construction and air pollutants that build up in enclosed areas. NASA actually did some studies in the 1990s, you know, sort of geared around, I guess, that space travel was going to be in a very enclosed situation, and they were looking for solutions to improve their air quality. They recommended that you use 15 to 18 good-sized houseplants in a typical home. Their study was done on 6 to 8 inch plants, which is kind of something like this. The rule of thumb is to allow one house plant for 100 square feet of living area. Now, if you have a larger plant, a big ficus that has like, say, a yard of foliage, then you're going to count it as 3 or 4 of these plants. All of the plants that NASA tested are plants that are standard as house plants. That means they would be plants that you're going to be interested in growing anyway, but an added benefit is they help improve your air quality. Some of those they studied were weeping fig, English ivy, the spider plant, golden pothos or ivy, the spats, the aglaonemas, which are Chinese evergreens, the bamboo palms, mother-in-law tongues, the philodendrons, the heartleaf, the split leaf, the elephant ears, the dracaenas, the typical cornstalk plant, the marginata, which has the red edge, and the Cavendish dwarf bananas. Now, it happens that plants that are particularly effective in removing benzene, formaldehyde, and trichloroethylene can be used. Those are the chemicals that are leached out when you have new carpeting. So if you're trying to get rid of that terrible new carpet smell, try some mums, English ivy, mother-in-law's tongue, the dracaenas that we mentioned, the peace lily, Chinese evergreen, or the bamboo palms. Now, Susan's going to be talking about these plants anyway. Just remember that they do help improve your indoor air quality.
Yes, it truly does. Actually, you know, the way to think about it is you take, these plants are actually exterior plants, and those exterior plants, we take those exterior plants and we bring them inside to purify our air and also to make it, you know, lush. It's not as stale and stagnant as we're normally used to.
Right.
You know, most of us work in an office environment, and we don't necessarily want to feel, you know, we live under these artificial lights all the time. It's an artificial environment, so we want to bring something alive to make it cozy so that we feel like we're part of the outside. So when we're stuck inside all day working, we can actually breathe a little bit and feel like we're a part of the outside when we're sitting in front of a computer terminal all day. But after you've gotten to a point where you've selected from this list a variety of plants, which are normally tropical plants that can take low light conditions with a, you know, with a certain amount of temperature, those are all the things that you need to consider in that selection process. And why do you consider that? It's because those are the ingredients that are required for these plants to actually perform. When we buy a plant, we always think about, you know, the product that we desire, that beautiful plant structure like I have behind me, that green thing that's going to live and thrive. We don't think about that one little single spathiphyllum leaf that we get after we've had a plant and we've mistreated it inside for so long. So those are some of the things that you have to consider. The light requirement, the temperature, the water requirement, and not only the water requirement, just as we eat every day, plants need to eat as well, and that's called fertilizer. So those are the 4 major ingredients that you need to consider when you're thinking about doing interior horticulture. And when you're thinking about managing those components of a plant, what you actually have to think about is the bottom part, which is the root structure, because that's where you're going to get your fertilizers and your nutrients as well as your water. And then the external canopy, which we always see, which is the indicator when we're mismanaging our plants. And those are just some of the things that you need to think about. And when you're dealing with plants, you have to think about the ingredients, but all the exterior components. That's where you move into the pesky little creatures that we don't like. When I did interior horticulture, I would always hear these people complain about, oh, this plant has bugs and all these gnats flying around, and we'd have to deal with those problems.
Right.
So that's another element or another variable in that equation of management that you actually have to deal with. And there's a chemical way to deal with them, but anytime you move into an interior environment, you really don't want to necessarily overdose this plant with chemicals, because what does that affect? That affects you as an individual and your family environment, and you know from experience you don't want to expose your kids or yourself to a lot of chemicals. So we tend to take a natural approach to management. And how do you actually do that? Well, say you have mealybug or you have gnat problems. Well, that's 2 different types of bugs that live in 2 different spaces on the plant. A mealybug is going to tend to be located at the apex, the growing point, or the tip, or the underside of every plant. And what that actually does, what that actually means is that that's the habitat for that specific plant. And we want to go ahead and treat that bug in that area. So there's a couple of ways from a non-toxic or non-chemical standpoint to treat it. You can take the plant outside and wash it down every 2 weeks, but of course that's labor intensive and we don't want to spend a lot of time doing things that cost us energy. That's high maintenance. We want a low maintenance plant. So then you can move in towards doing a soap bath where you mix some dishwashing or detergent with, you dilute it 9 times with water so that you can actually spray the plant down, and it actually removes, it creates a slick surface and it removes the bug from the plant, and then you just monitor it periodically to make sure that the bug has not returned. But what you also want to do is that bug lays larvae, which creates the reproductive cycle, so you want to monitor that soil to see if there's any more larvae that hatch and move up to the apex where that plant likes to, with its piercing sucking mouth part, take and feed off of that plant. Then there's gnats. Gnats also tend to like to lay their eggs in the soil base. So if that becomes a problem long term, what you want to do is potentially break up the soil and repot that plant in a non-contaminated soil medium, and then see if that actually helps to prevent any more population explosions of bugs and pests.
Right. One thing I like to recommend to people for indoor plants is to choose a time that you regularly water a plant. If you do it on a casual basis, you tend to either overwater the plant or underwater the plant. You're going to get into one of those situations where you walk in and this poor plant is, laid out, and you say, oh, I guess it must need water. And while you're on this regular schedule, one good thing is it's focusing you on that plant, and if you get a disease or you get a pest, you're going to notice it a lot earlier. My favorite non-toxic methods are water, just blasting anything off of there. And if a pest is concentrated, get out the scissors and get rid of a leaf. That's a simple way of doing it if you catch things on time, and if you're regularly paying attention to those plants, you are going to learn. You're going to catch the things when there's 1 or 2 mealy bugs rather than 150 of them.
Yes, monitoring those population explosions are very important when you're trying to manage bugs or pests, to control them before they get overwhelming for the system, so you don't lose your plant in the
And
area.
then I would go the insecticidal soap too. I mean,
Yes.
it covers a broad range. You don't have. I know it's always a problem. What kind of a bug is on this plant here? I know this is a bug. Insecticidal soap, you just blast, you blast those little insecticidal soaps, non-toxic to you, the children, the pets. You have to repeat insecticidal soap treatments. You do it well, you have to get in all the little nooks and crannies, come back a couple of days later, and then come back again another couple of days later.
Usually it's a 10-day cycle.
Right.
And what you want to do is just check and make sure you look at the apex, the growing point of a plant. You look underneath the leaf to see if you have any more signs of the population trying to come back. And if it gets overwhelming and out of control, you might even want to consider getting rid of the plant.
Right.
Just throw the thing out and get rid of it. We don't need it anymore.
Right. And I encourage people, we keep telling you, you're going to kill plants. And if this is a $5 plant, I mean, it's going to last longer than cut flowers. Just treat it as a disposable. Go tuck it out under your azalea bush, and it's going to turn into fertilizer for your azaleas in the spring.
Well,
don't worry about it.
There are many people like me that want to sell you plants, so that's something to keep in mind. We have to keep that market moving.
That's right. That's right. So what are some of your top 10 hard to kill plants?
Top 10. Oh, that's a long list.
Top 5.
Top 5.
Okay.
I like Sansevieria because it's probably the mother-in-law tongue. It's probably the low maintenance plant, the lowest maintenance plant that you can possibly have. The only thing you have to do potentially is come in and prune it out a tongue every now and then. And pothos is probably about the easiest thing. It's not one of my favorite, probably about the easiest one that you can put in an office environment or a home environment and forget about it and forget to even water it for 2 weeks, and it does really well.
Right. And remember too, on the pothos, if you wanted to get bigger leaves, the ones that have the huge leaves that you see, the only reason they're that huge is because they're growing on a structure. If you want to try and make, really gigantic leaves, put it on one of the little peat poles, and your leaves are going to start getting...
Yeah, the higher it grows, the bigger it gets.
the
It totally goes against the natural ecology of the system.
Right, right.
Because it's seeking light, but usually when you get to the top and you have a large amount of light, the leaves get smaller. But this plant does the opposite,
So
kind of like what I do in horticulture.
That's a
Everything
fun thing. That's a fun plant to play with, though.
Yeah, it's really nice, and I like the bromeliads in certain environments, and then for my larger specimens, tree forms, I don't necessarily like to use ficus because they're very temperamental, and I'm not a high maintenance person, so I like low maintenance. So I tend to go with more of your palms. Rhapis palms are really fun. They tend to be a little bit more expensive, or the mass canes, the corn plants that we have back here, which are really fun, and dracaenas, all the different types of dracaenas. I really like those, and the ags too. I just have a large palette.
I do too. I like the bamboo palm.
Types.
That's one that I'm really coming to like.
Bamboo
They're
palm.
not as temperamental as some of the other palms. It looks like they're a little bit hardier. It really does look like bamboo if you like the bamboo look too.
It really is nice.
And I know a lot of people are talking now about moving their plants outside. If we ever, if the rain ever stops, a lot of people move plants outside. It kind of rejuvenates these house plants over the summer. If you can get them outside, get them into some, air, get wind movement, which is good for them.
But going back to the ingredients, you have to be very careful because if you take a person that has not been exposed to full sun and you put them in full sun, what's going to happen? They're going to burn. The same concept applies to interior plants. When you take them from a low-light environment and you put them in a full sun environment, you're going to lose your leaves. And once those cell structures in that leaf are damaged, they're not going to come back. And it's going to, really take a step, your plant's going to take a step back from it. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you do expose your plants to all the outer elements being outside, you have potential to attract certain bugs to it. And those certain bugs are going to contaminate your plant potentially. So you want to check it before you bring it back inside.
Right, and remember, if you're taking it outside, I've had friends that have had problems. You've got to watch if your plant has a saucer on it. Some plants are susceptible to getting root rots. If you let too much water sit in that saucer, the water's going to wick up into that plant, and it can be a real problem. It can kill your plant. So consider taking the saucer off, or just be conscious that you have to watch the water, the water level in your soil.
Managing those ingredients.
Right. It's always the light, the water. This is going back because I meant to mention this a while ago when the air conditioner kicked on in here. Watch, the temperature too. Air conditioning. If you have a plant that a lot of cold air is blasting on them, some of them don't like it. My mother killed a gorgeous 6-foot Norfolk pine. Just didn't realize and moved it, another foot. She was rearranging furniture and moved it over 2 feet, and the air conditioner just killed that plant. In a week it was dead.
All about going back to that site analysis when you're looking at that space. What you want to do is determine, temperature is one of your ingredients. If you want to put a plant in this environment and you have an air vent above it, you have to really make sure that that plant can handle those extreme temperatures, not only the summertime, but the wintertime, because when the cold goes off and the heat comes on, that's a totally different environment, and that plant has to adapt to those extreme temperatures as well. And your managing style of water too, because in the summertime your plants are going to take up a lot of nutrients, and you fertilize your plants about every 2 to 3 weeks from March to September, and you water them every week. Monitor your soil during that time period, because that's when your plants are most active. But just like we go to sleep at night, plants go to sleep in the wintertime. So you have to back off of that, your fertilizing, and back off of your watering, because your plants aren't necessarily taking in up all those nutrients or taking in all that water. And if you overwater your plants, you can potentially damage your root structures. So that's something to keep in mind.
Right, another thing to keep in mind, if you're going to be moving your plants in and out like we're talking about, that's something you're interested in, then you might actually want to have your plants in plastic containers and have a decorative planter that you're inserting that plastic container in, so that it's a lot easier to take a plant in a plastic container, especially a fairly large plant, and get it outside than it is to lug a big decorative container outside, or if you want to put the thing in the shower and get the dust off of it, it's a lot easier to work if you're treating diseases or cleaning the plant up than working with some big, decorative urn.
Let's talk a little bit about that, some gardening tasks that you might want to do in the month of July. I know we're getting a lot of calls at our office right now, or people, might be going on vacation right now, and there's some things, maybe some precautions that they could take in the month of July to make their landscape look a lot better.
Okay. First thing I would suggest with the weather that we have is to take this opportunity to weed your gardens. You are going to never have an easier time of weeding than right now. All those little oak seedlings and chicken trees and blackberry seedlings that has sprung up in your beds, you can get them out now instead of just whacking them down at ground level, which is what most of us do. Take the time right now to get those roots out and get rid of those problems. The ground's soft. This opportunity probably won't roll around for a good time again. You might want to also, before you leave, check for drowning plants in your yard. The soil is so saturated right now that we have had reports of even passion flowers. We had 2 questions about that at the Daylily Festival, and we're convinced those plants were just drowning. There's no oxygen in the water for them. So just kind of make a quick checklist of your garden. You might want to consider fertilizing before you leave. The same thing, we have had so much rain that you very likely have low levels of nitrogen. Get some more slow release fertilizer on your plants, and have strength soluble fertilizer before you go on vacation, or just to give them a boost right now. You still do have time to plant some seeds, the moonflowers, the zinnias, the sunflowers. I know Stuart had some tomato seedlings getting ready to go for fall planting that needs to be done by the middle of next month. Prune your azaleas, because you have to have that done by mid-July, so when you come back from vacation, it's too late. You're going to be cutting off all your flower buds if you don't do that by the middle of this month. If your crepe myrtles are small enough to do so, you might want to trim those seed heads and force them to rebloom. Take a quick check. Make sure, because we've had so much rain, we haven't had high sunlight, and if you're going to be gone, just get some of those things into filtered light, where if we have periods of strong sunlight, your plants will be protected while you're going on vacation.
Okay, I think we're kind of winding down on time, but we wanted Susan maybe to talk a little bit about what are some of her favorite plants, hanging plants, flowering plants, real durable, unkillable plants, and I don't know if she maybe brought some examples for us today.
Well, actually, like I mentioned a little while ago, you have, this would be an example of a pothos ivy, which is a real doable plant. Something that most people have, probably 90% of the people that have interior plants go with this kind of plant. And then you have like the marginatas back here that have a thinner leaf. A really nice specimen. It does well in interior environments. It can handle a lot of different temperature changes, and it's just a hardy plant. Really very simple to manage, not hard to kill. And then you have a mass cane behind you, which is a corn plant. So a really nice specimen, real showy, tall, upright.
In terms of people, I know we'll get some calls about watering and using soil polymers in with their mix. Do you have some experience with that, and do you like using that, or you'd rather just water?
The only time you really need to use soil polymers are when the plants are going to experience extreme conditions. And what do I mean by extreme conditions? I mean that they're going to dry out really fast. So if you're going to usually we use polymers in exterior containers with a variety of annuals and perennials mixed in, but rarely do I ever use them for home environments because it overmanages the system, causing problems.
Okay. I think we're kind of winding down on time, and we want to thank our guests today for being with us. We want to thank Susan for coming to us from Rain Tree Nursery, and Janae Foley, who's been a guest on our program several times. In helping putting today's program together. I want to remind you that this show is going to be on the first Thursday of each month, so get your gardening questions ready for us. Feel free to call us live during the show, and If you happen to miss our show, we want to remind you that it's going to be replayed on July 4th at 12 a.m. and at 1 p.m. and on July 5th at 5 a.m. You can catch this show again. Also, be sure to visit our website. Our website is www.LafayetteMasterGardeners.org, and you can visit our website, and on that website we have applications to join the Master Gardener program, which we take applications year-round, and our class will be starting again in January. So if you're interested in becoming a Master Gardener, feel free to call our number.